Section 49 introduces us to a group of people commonly known as the Shakers, who were Quakers who had broken off and formed their own way of worship. Let me show you just this little clip from this documentary on YouTube that explains a little bit about them.
They called themselves the United Society of Believers in Christ's Second Appearing. But because of their ecstatic dancing, the world called them Shakers. They were ordinary people who gave up everything, homes, families, and livelihoods, to put into daily practice what they called authentic Christianity. 75 years before the emancipation of the slaves and 150 years before women began voting in America, the Shakers were practicing social, economic, and spiritual equality for all members. They believed in pacifism and feminism, freedom from prejudice, natural health and hygiene, and joyful personal worship. The Shakers were celibate. They did not marry or bear children, yet they are one of the most enduring religious experiments in American history. Their radical views were so challenging, their way of life so appealing, that the world's people, as they called outsiders, flocked to this new American religion.
As you can see here, the woman attributed to being the early founder of Shakers was a woman named Ann Lee. And as you can see here, she believed from an early age that God had called her to be one of his messengers, and she came over here to America in 1772. They struggled during the Revolution, but gradually gained momentum from the same series of spiritual awakenings that gave rise to the Restoration. Having lost all 4 of her children to death as infants before being abandoned by her adulterous husband, Lee died in 1784. Shakerism continued to thrive in America, however, leading to the establishment of several communities, including North Union, Ohio, just a few miles from Joseph Smith in Kirtland. The Saints and the Believers, or the Shakers, traded and were good neighbors, and that's kind of what's going to bring up this revelation is some of the Shaker communities will cross paths in Ohio with our Latter-day Saint communities who are gathering there in Kirtland as well. Just a few things to clarify as well. They believe that the original Church of Christ had apostatized, thus they're looking for a restoration, very similar to us. And I want to talk about one thing. Ann Lee, by her righteousness, you notice in the section heading it says that they believed that Christ had appeared already for his second coming in the form of a woman, Ann Lee. Don't take that out of context that they think that Ann Lee came out of heaven and somehow was Jesus. A better way to explain it is that because of Ann Lee's righteousness, she became in tune and formed the same spiritual character as Christ, and thus became a manifestation of the second coming of Christ. In other words, it would be like saying, if you want to know what Christ is like, come meet Ann Lee. In that sense, he or his character had reappeared back on the earth. Some of their beliefs that were a little different than us, though, however, were that marriage was worldly, that sex is ungodly. They didn't believe in a physical resurrection or a need for baptism. Also, temperance and eating meat. Some of them said you shouldn't eat meat at all. There had been a Shaker who had been converted to Mormonism, and his name was Lehman Copley. And when Lehman Copley, as it says here, joined the church, he still retained ideas that the Shakers were right in some particulars of their faith. And he came to Joseph seeking for some clarification on some of the things that he had believed. And Section 49 is the result of that, of Lehman Copley's request, and to clarify some of his positions. You'll see some of the Shaker beliefs addressed throughout this revelation, and the Lord clarifying some very, very important principles, including foundational principles on marriage that you'll see in here that I believe are some of the founding verses that we quote in the Family Proclamation to the world today. So as you study Section 49, look for the Lord's clarification on some of the doctrines that he wanted the Shakers and all of us to make sure we clearly understand.